if they don't slow down, Christian Wood could potentially be an all-star. Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another episode of NBA Now. It's your boy Dom, and we're gonna get right into things here today. So, today, we are talking about the Houston Rockets, and more specifically, we're talking about Christian Wood, but it's a pretty overall video on kind of the whole team. Anyways, this is a team that is on a 6-game win streak, bringing themselves from a 1-16 team to a 7-16 team. Definitely a team that has had a great last couple of weeks here in the NBA and is starting to push themselves a little bit in towards the playoff race, or at least the play-in race. Now, I think for the most part, they're a little bit locked out of it, but they are only like 3 games behind the Kings, who are the 11 seed, and the Kings are only half a game behind Portland. So really, it's a pretty close race. It's starting to become more of a closer race at the bottom of this Western Conference, with teams like the Rockets winning a lot more and everything like that, and more established teams like the Nuggets and whatnot losing a lot more to kind of shrink that gap between playoff and non-playoff team. But looking at Christian Wood, this is a guy that has been really phenomenal for them as of recently. Excluding one of the OKC games that they had, he put up, I believe, 20 points in every single one of their 6 games in this 6-game win streak. And ever since they kind of moved him to that center position and kind of took Daniel Theis out of the starting lineup, it's done wonders for the team. I think this is slowly becoming a roster that Stephen Silas likes more and more. We know that Stephen Silas was a guy that kind of helped develop that Mavericks historical offense with Luka Doncic, and ended up coming to the Rockets to kind of try and do the same thing with James Harden. Obviously, then shortly afterwards, the James Harden thing happened, and he ended up on being the head coach of a rebuilding team. But this is a team that I think, he's starting to try and figure out how he wants to use all these guys properly. He's got Christian Wood, a guy who, is potentially going to be an all-star if they continue to play the way they're playing, and he's, obviously leading the way for them. Obviously, if they do end up making the playoffs, I think it'd be a shock to a lot of people, especially after the start to the season they had, specifically, but also the fact that they just came out of the offseason where they got the number 2 overall pick and drafted Jalen Green. So this is not a team that had expectations to win coming into the year. It's a team that everybody kind of thought would be a little bit experimental, right? You had some veterans in DJ Augustine and Eric Gordon and Daniel House and stuff like that, and David Nwaba on the team. So you had veterans mixed with your young guys. You were kind of truly trying to see what you had here. Jayshawn Tate, for the last couple years, has been a really solid piece for them. A guy that doesn't really have that outside game, but he's just found a way to just be gritty and just make things happen in the league, which is something that a lot of players at like his caliber of player take advantage of, right? Especially if you're a guy that will come out there and work on the defensive end. It doesn't matter that he's 6'4", he's playing power forward, small forward, whatever it is, and he's just hustling, and sometimes just out hustling guys gets you places. I mean, Lou Dort is another guy like that. It's something that guys across the league take advantage of, and Jayshawn Tate is one of the best guys at doing it. But Christian Wood, he's averaging 16 and 11 so far on the season, and there was a lot of all-star buzz for him last year headed into prior to his injury, and he was looking really good. I mean, he averaged 21 points last year, and it was kind of it felt like a lock for most improved player until he ended up getting injured. Obviously that ended up happening, and then this season his stats had taken a little bit of a dip to start the year, but especially when you look at this win streak that they've gone on, if he continues that pace, his stats will continue to rise over that 20 point per game mark and everything like that. And this guy is he's a double-double machine. He is a double-double machine. He kind of reminds you of kind of a more modern LaMarcus Aldridge, right? We know that LaMarcus Aldridge for years was considered the 2010 guy, and Christian Wood might be starting to make himself in that conversation of just a guy that it doesn't really matter. He's just going to go out there and get 20 points and 10 rebounds, and typically when he does that, the team is going to be successful. Now, I know he, sometimes he'll have a very good game and the team doesn't win, especially at the start of the season. But just the further that we've continued to kind of come into the season, I think this team has started to kind of find a groove, which is crazy to think about considering, they've had some injuries and stuff like that going on. And, when you look at their last game, they didn't even have their number 2 overall pick, right? Or Kevin Porter Jr. They also still have the whole John Wall situation, which I made a video about last week. So you guys can go check that out. But this is a team that, is dealing with some injuries and stuff like that, but is still just finding a way to really, really make things happen in the last few games. And one of those main guys, besides Christian Wood, has wildly, whatever word you want to use, weirdly enough, been Garrison Mathews, a guy that they brought in. I want to say he's on a 2-way contract, and he has played lights out for them, especially from 3. This is a guy that is shooting out of this world. He's shooting 42% from 3 on 7 3-pointers a game. And he's shooting almost 50% from the field, averaging almost 12 points per game. He just came into this team and just brought something that they didn't quite have, right? When you look at this roster, and it's not something you initially think of, but a lot of teams in the NBA have like a sharpshooter, right? Like, obviously the Warriors have Steph Curry and Clay, but if you look at like the Sixers, they have Seth Curry. Or if you look at a team like, Milwaukee, they've got Grayson Allen. Or Brooklyn, they've got Joe Harris, right? So there's a lot of teams around the league, and especially good teams that are good, have like a guy that is just going to go out there and shoot 40% from 3, and it really doesn't matter who you're playing or who's defending them. They're just going to knock it down. And it almost feels like Garrison Mathews might end up being that guy for the Houston Rockets. And it's kind of crazy to think, this guy's only 25 years old, so he's not far out of your timeline. More than likely, you'll be bringing him back and having him on the team for probably the foreseeable future if he continues to play the way he is now. But, he's only in the 3rd year in the league for him. He spent his first 2 years in Washington and didn't do a whole lot there. But coming to the Rockets, he's just been able to just really knock down his shots. He was a good 3-point shooter in Washington, shot 41% and then 38% his first 2 years. And that was on a lot lower threes, but decent amount for the minutes he was playing. He was averaging about 3 threes a game for those 2 years, so about half the threes per game, and was still shooting the same amount or same percentage. So really what he's done is kind of just upped his volume and everything like that. And if this guy can be something for you on the offensive end to help you kind of stretch things out, that makes things so much easier for all your players. I know this is something that a lot of Warriors fans talk about and everything like that, but gravity and stuff like that. Curry's gravity is unmatched in the history of basketball, but having good 3-point shooters forces spacing for the defense. And if you could have guys that just sit in both corners the whole time and you're really just running 3-man game with the other 3 guys, it makes it so much harder on the defense because help is limited, switching is limited, and if one guy gives up on or relaxes a little bit for one possession, that could easily be 3 points for the other team. And so every team really needs a guy like Garrison Mathews and or like Seth Curry or whatever. And if Garrison Mathews can kind of be that level of player and that level of shooter for them, that's a hell of a find for the Rockets and especially their general manager to bring in a guy like that. Now, it's going to have to kind of wait and see. It's obviously only a 10-game sample size, so although he had the 18 and then the 64 game seasons for his first 2 years in Washington, and kind of showed the same percentage of shooting. Obviously not quite on the same clip. It will kind of be like a little bit of a wait and see to see, if he can continue this. I think tomorrow is an absolutely huge game for this roster, as they're going to go up against Brooklyn, and they go on a pretty hard stretch here. Not really playing a team where you'd expect them to really have a fighting chance with until the 23rd of December, where they play the Indiana Pacers, who I might have a video coming out on tomorrow or the day afterwards. But this is a team that plays Brooklyn, Milwaukee, Memphis, who I believe is still missing Ja Morant, Atlanta, Cleveland, New York. I guess they do play Detroit on the 18th, so sorry, I skipped over Detroit. So probably not until Detroit that you really have where you would look at the schedule and be like, oh, that could be a win. And then you play Chicago and Milwaukee right after Detroit. But they're probably going to come out and beat like 2 or 3 of these teams if they keep playing the way that they are. Now, I think their win streak will end within the next 6 games regardless. They're just going to be playing too many good teams in too short of amount of time, I think, for this roster to kind of keep things going. But there's definitely a possibility. I think tomorrow against Brooklyn we'll kind of see a lot of stuff flushed out for this team that we maybe didn't get to see over this win streak, because although they beat a couple teams to start this win streak that were impressive wins in Chicago and in Charlotte, both teams that are Chicago's fighting for a top seed in the East, and then Charlotte is fighting for a playoff spot. But then they ended up beating OKC twice, who is a team that doesn't really care about winning and has the same record at this point as the Rockets. They beat Orlando, one of the worst teams in the league, and they beat a struggling Pelicans team that is just kind of all over the place, which I might make another video on. I made a video on them a couple weeks ago, which is still pretty relevant, but they've started to kind of do some other things since then. But, they didn't really beat top-end talent in this 6-game win streak, but for them to get this 6-game win streak is so big for the locker room, even if it does end up kind of dwindling out here in these next couple games, and we kind of see them return to maybe not quite as bad as they were at the start of the season, because now you've unlocked maybe some confidence in some of these guys. But it will more than likely dwindle out. But the fact that you were able to go on this is so big for your locker room and stuff like that, because when a team sits there and loses and loses and loses and loses and knows that they're not competing for anything, sometimes it can be hard. It can be hard to be motivated in that type of circumstance, right? It can be hard for you to feel like what you're doing on the court night in and night out, or what you're doing in the gym matters if you're not seeing any real productivity come from it in the wins column. And just for the fact that they went on this win streak will be big for them, because it should, yes, they're going to win more games throughout the season, but I do think they'll still be one of the bottom teams in the conference, even if right now it looks like they could be pushing for a playoff spot. But this might be their biggest win streak of the year for however long this goes on. And it's going to do wonders for their morale for the next couple months, because it's something that you can look back at and be like, let's get back to that. Let's work to do that again. Even if it's not this year that they get to do that again, they can go into the offseason, they can be like, hey, remember we went on this huge win streak last year. Let's bring in some new guys. Let's develop a little bit more and do this again next year, but more than once, right? So that's going to be a big thing for these young guys to look at. And a guy that's really also thrived during this time, and has kind of seen himself jump back into what he was, is Eric Gordon. Eric Gordon is a guy averaging about 14 points per game right now, but he was a crucial piece for the Rockets really ever since 2016, 2017 when they signed him. And he's just his whole time in the league has been a good player. The lowest he's ever averaged was 13.4 points per game in 2014, 2015, but ever since 2008, this guy has just been a steady 15 to 20 point per game scorer for them. I remember the one Nuggets-Rockets game that I've been to, Eric Gordon had 50 points in that game. It was actually a really sad game because that was the day that Kobe Bryant passed away, so rest in peace to Kobe Bryant. But yeah, this guy, he's a bucket when he wants to be a bucket, and sometimes, he just will be unstoppable. Like, he just plays with a way that Some nights he plays like a superstar, and other nights he's just a role player. And that's good to have on teams, especially teams that, were contending as the Rockets were just a couple years ago. But what this is doing for him, and which is big for the Rockets organization, is boosting his trade value. It's something that some teams struggle to understand. One of those teams would be potentially the Sacramento Kings. When you want to trade a player, or when you feel that player really has no future left with your team, you play him. Now, the Rockets don't fully understand this, as they refuse to play John Wall, but the fact that they're playing Eric Gordon a substantial amount of minutes and seeing what he can do. I mean, he is averaging almost 30 minutes per game this year, so definitely, he's not just out there for 5 minutes or whatever and putting up decent stats. He's averaging a decent amount of minutes. He's doing his normal thing. And so, as we get towards the trade deadline, although his contract's a little bit hefty, especially for his age, at 32 years old, I believe it's 3 years, about $18 million per year. I think there's a team option on the last year, if I'm remembering that correctly. That might be wrong, but that it's something like that. And this is a guy that, so at the end of his contract, he'll be really 34 for the team to opt out, 35 if he keeps his whole contract. But if a team starts to get desperate or really kind of sees an opportunity to push upwards in the standings and feels that he could be a good addition to the roster, although his contract's a bit hefty, the fact that he's producing and stuff like that makes it so much easier to trade him, potentially towards the trade deadline, or maybe in the offseason when his contract has a year off of it and is closer to expiring, right, where it would, I think, then be a 1-and-1. Which a 1-and-1 is essentially 1 year guaranteed, and then 1 year where the team can opt out if they choose to. But yeah, he could be a big trade piece for this team, bring in some more assets to them. Obviously a team that is trying to quickly bring in a lot of young players and kind of make things happen to the point where they can rebuild and be back at it, especially with a coach that I think has a very bright offensive mind. But yeah, I mean, those are the main guys really to talk about for this roster. Şengün continues to impress people as he looks more and more like one of my favorite players in the league in Jokic. Now, he's got a long way to go before he gets there, but he shows flashes of it and is definitely a bright piece for the Rockets as well. Kevin Porter Jr., I personally, coming into the season, I was like, yo, he's going to be pretty good, or it's going to be, one or the other type thing for him or Jalen Green. But he's been a little bit underwhelming, but has kind of, especially during this win streak, really found his groove as a playmaker. Now, I personally still at this point don't think he can be your primary playmaker on your roster, just because he doesn't quite always have that. But if you can bring in one other guy to be a just better playmaker than him or whatever, maybe it's in the draft or whatever, but for this year it'll work, and then next year, he'll have experienced this, and however his role ends up developing for the future, it'll be good to know that at worst you can fall back to him as, a 6 assists per game guy at this point. And I believe over this 6-game win streak, I want to say he's averaging 8 or 9 assists or something like that. He did end up getting his first triple-double just a few games ago, courtesy of Şengün. But yeah, there's definitely potential on this roster. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. I didn't really touch on Jalen Green at all, and this is almost a 20-minute video, so a lot of things going for the Rockets at this moment. Now, expect that to slow down a little bit as we continue to head into the future, but if they don't slow down, Christian Wood could potentially be an all-star, and this team could be looking to do a lot of great things here as the season continues. So with that said, it's been your boy Dom. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure you guys drop a like and subscribe for more, and I'll catch y'all next time. Peace out, guys.